take a look at the cotangent graph. This one right here. To understand this one, we have to understand the basic cotangent curve. Look back at the video about the tangent and to see about that one. But for a cotangent, it's not defined wherever the sine equals 0, because you can't divide by 0. So where is the sine equal to 0? That's your y-coordinate at 0, and at pi, and at 2 pi, and at 3 pi, and at negative pi, and at negative 2 pi, etc. So again, your period is going to be pi. Oops, I didn't do that. So there's 0, there's pi, and here's pi over 2 right in the middle. What's the cotangent of pi over 2? It's the cosine, which is 0, divided by the sine, which is 1, which is 0. Well, 0 divided by 1 is just 0. So there's your graph. And now what's going to happen to the left of this? Well, is this positive or negative? Are these things positive or negative? It's the cotangent of 45 degrees. There's 45, pi over 4. What's the cotangent? What's root 2 over 2 divided by root 2 over 2? Positive 1. And what's root 2 over 2 divided by negative root 2 over 2? Negative 1. So your cotangent graph looks like that. It's the opposite way. Remember your tangent graph, I'll do this in green. If you remember, your tangent graph was right here. It went through this same point right there, but its asymptote was, there was your tangent graph. It was shifted over, and it was going the other direction. Okay, understand that? So your cotangent graph is going to be every pi degrees. That's negative pi right there. Every pi degrees, you're going to have an asymptote. And remember, the period means that how long does it take for it to start over and do the same thing? Well, it's not 2 pi for the tangent and cotangent graph, it's just pi. It only takes pi degrees, or pi radians I should say, for the graph to repeat. So there's your basic cotangent graph. Alright, so how do we graph it when we have something like this? Well, here's how I suggest you do it. I suggest you put your horizontal axis in first. Don't put your vertical axis, don't put your vertical axis in yet, just your horizontal. Let's deal with our horizontal stuff first. Actually, let's deal with the vertical stuff first. So 1 means I shift up 1. So there's my center line. That's where my point's going to be sitting. 3 means that it just goes up quicker. We'll deal with that in a second. That in a cotangent and tangent graph, the amplitude doesn't really visually affect it very much. It just stretches it. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now let's deal with this. The period equals pi, not 2 pi, over pi over 4, which equals 4. So this is what I suggest you do. 0, 4. That's my full period. So this is 2 right in the middle. For the tangent graph, I had to split the difference. I had to go negative 2 to positive 2. But for a cotangent, it's easier because I start at 0. That's my first asymptote. And then my other asymptote is at the end of my period. So whereas 4 is where I'm going to have another asymptote. But I'm also shifting it. I'll change to green. I'm also shifting it right 3. So instead of 0, this is 3. Instead of 4, this is 5. And instead of, 2, this is 5. Instead of 4, this is 7. So my points are 3, 5, 7. Whoops, I went over too far on that one, didn't I? There we go. Something didn't look right. 3, 5, 7 are my points. Now, remember, what does that mean? That means I have a vertical asymptote at 3 and a vertical asymptote at 5, and I have the center point vertical asymptote at 3 and 7. I have the center point at 5, 1, and it's going to go, instead of here, it's going to be up 3. It's going to be right there. Your teacher probably doesn't want you to name that point, but you might as well know how to do it. Instead of over 1 down 1, it's over 1 down 3 because my amplitude is 3. So it stretches the graph a little bit. So your graph looks like this. It's a little more curvy than that, probably. Make it a little curvy. And then, again, another 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's another asymptote. Because why? Because the period's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's another asymptote. By the way, where's your y-axis? Now that you've drawn, do you know where your y-axis is? It's going to be right there. So just draw your y-axis in now. Now that you know where it's at, draw it in. And again, that's how I suggest that you do it, so that you're not erasing things and messing stuff up all the time. So let's do another period for it. This would be right here at 1, and it would be over 1 up 3. That's going to be your y-intercept, and it's going to be over 1 down 3. And so your graph's going to look... Okay, that was bad. Try that again. Whoops. Try that again. Something like that. That's what your graph's going to look like. And it's going to do the same thing over here. Something like, I'll rough sketch it, etc. That's how you graph a cotangent graph.